is Mark Parfitt. I'm a recording and mix engineer, based in Los Angeles, but I've come from by way of Florida and New Mexico prior to that, and I'm just a guy out here doing my best, and I'm fortunate enough to work with just really phenomenal talent that pushes me to be great, and I try to, reciprocate that. So, just some artists that I've worked with. I've had the Aurora N for about a year and a half now, and I've been able to, on the recording side, used it for Justin Bieber. I've used it for Normani. I have a lot of songs I'm looking forward to when they come out with her. Saweetie, I've cut a lot of vocals with her. Um, One of my more recent songs that was a bigger song for me was SZA and Justin Bieber Snooze remix, and that was it was initially cut at a different studio, but as far as the final mix, it was over here on my Aurora for playback and just doing like printing, weird vocal effects through guitar pedals and coming back in, and that was one of the more notable ones in the recent. And I've taken it with a songwriter Pooh Bear I work with a lot. I'll fly to Miami and bring the Aurora N for his projects because I'm also at a point where I don't like to rely on any studios, even if it's major studios. I have like just a lot of trust issues. So I at least try to have my own computer and my own interface. So I just know at baseline I'm gonna be like gonna go through unscathed and have a good time. That was the main selling point initially, was the conversion. That what sold me. And it's such a weird thing because even when you have like high-end gear, like the wrong converter, sometimes you might be running it through and it might not be adding what I thought it would be adding. Or if I want to do levels to it too, I can feel some of it like, oh, I did something, but did it really make a difference? Or now it kind of just feels like I don't have the same emotion or doesn't resonate quite the same. And I noticed that with my last converter. And so when I had initially used Lynx the first time, it was a Hilo, and it was through the same artist I've recorded this 24K Golden. I've recorded him before. Same vocal mic, the same preamp compressor that every major studio has. All the ingredients are the same, but I was like, man, it just sounds so open and clear. And now's when I noticed, is like the owner of the studio said, dude, it's that Hilo is the heart of everything here. So that was like a big selling point because the prior interface that I had, I was feeling that where I'd go out to my expensive outboard, whether it's a Tube Tech or Neve or some of my Hazel Rig stuff, and then I come back and be like, I don't know, I don't think it really like, I don't know if it did anything, or if I'm just feeling like I'm like it's a placebo of like I feel good about myself doing this, but most of the time I noticed it wasn't like beneficial. So with the Aurora N, I can like go in and out multiple times and I don't notice like any just weirdness, It always still comes back like what how it was beforehand, but enhanced, It's not like I don't feel any disconnect. So that was a major thing with the Aurora, among many other reasons why I switched to that interface. Yeah, that's one of the main things, especially because most of my major clients I work for, I'm on the engineering and recording side. So it's not like you have a moment where you can troubleshoot. They're right there breathing down your neck and you have to make it happen right here. And I've just been through far too many studios that seemingly were nice, but were a disaster, behind the scenes. And when you understand like the technical side, like, oh yeah, it looks pretty, they have consoles, but like they didn't connect half of the stuff. And or it's like not updated, or it's not managed by anybody, it's not maintained. Like there's a billion factors that are gonna like just fuck you up, And I don't want to have any of those headaches because I've already been burnt by major artists, like just destroying me because that were out of my control essentially. So like the IO is such a major thing where that's the no-brainer. I've been Probably, I got the SD card set up a couple months ago and I run it on every session. I've definitely just run it as a quick backup because it's so easy to literally just press the record button on front and it starts a new take and rolling and you don't have to think about anything. And most of my sessions, I'll just run that because you never know when somebody's practicing on the mic and they sing it perfect right there and you weren't in record mode or they didn't even think, they're just practicing even in the room or something, just having the inputs always hot is just a great idea. And yeah, I have it going consistently. And I'm supposed to do I got a call about this orchestral gig that's gonna be like at like an art museum and they'll have multiple like a 26-piece orchestra or something. So I was like, okay, this would be great where I don't even have to bring the computer. I can just like bring the IO and some mics and stands and cables and worry about that because I already know nobody's going to be trying to listen for playback right there. They're just trying to get in, rehearse, and get out. And it's just another example of like how useful and effective like it can be. I'm just Pro Tools based. I'll use Ableton as well from time to time because a lot of the producers I work with use that, but everything's typically in Pro Tools. I'm using my Aurora N is kind of set up for like a dual purpose record and mix because I'm kind of in that hybrid space where I mix a lot of the times and I try to be at the highest level as possible, but I'm recording and I travel doing that as well. So mine was with I made mine specifically with that in mind. So I have like to cover my studio bases, I have 16 in and out of DB25, so it's just going right to the patch bay and I'm just in my studio land with all my outboard gear. Then I have a module with the 4 pre. I just have a utility. I just always have a preamp anywhere I go, and I don't necessarily have to bring an outboard preamp or depend on studios or anything. I can have a couple to get the day going. And then I have the module that's the two. I forgot the name of it, but it's the 2 TRS inputs and the 4 TRS outs, and that was kind of like the seal the deal for being a on the go device for me because the difficult thing with a lot of these like more high end converters is it's all DB25 and if I'm traveling either in town or traveling anywhere of any sorts, I don't want to lug a whole load of cables of DB25 snakes. Like it's just far too cumbersome. So that was one of the big draws for me going with the Aurora N was that specific module is covers me for my all my fly record gigs and day-to-day stuff. I know I can get in and out easily. And it's cool, even at my studio, I have it just dedicated, like the outputs are just dedicated to those. And then, I have my 16 line in and outs that are a little bit more like flexible. Yeah, that's probably the biggest issue with me. Because like the pop and R&B landscape is so like they're I want to say the most least patient some of the least patient group of like musicians where like rock bands they're down to sit around for a couple hours and find drum tones and before even recording and like you're spending days on end finding sounds like the pop R&B space is like if they see a drum kit around and they're playing on it, you should be recording it right now. Like you're like, "Oh, they're on the drums." Like if there's anything that's an instrument, I make sure to have it plugged in and set up and have an input already, ready to go in the template because if they just look at a handheld mic, they're going to grab it and, be like, why isn't the mic working? To see the guitar, like, yo, I'm not getting sound here, or like, so everything like is so now, and that completely adds to all the pressure because you only have one chance, and if you fumble it, then you're gonna get canned, and they're like, if you can't come through quickly and efficiently and match their pace, you're not going to hang around. It goes against the grain of being a creative, to say like, oh, let me go in tomorrow at 8 a.m. and just write something magical from 8 to 4. It just doesn't happen that way with all these guys. It's like, oh man, they call me right now, it would be a great idea. Let's go, let's go work on something. Go book a studio right now. Like, Mark, can you be there in 20 minutes? Okay, cool. That's just the pop R&B landscape. And, that's where I've landed, and I've totally enjoyed it. And that's where I've been really focusing on, where I've worked with like multiple genres over the years, but ultimately I find out like the pop R&B space is where I'm kind of happiest. Even with all the pressure, is like it's fun because once you get used to it, it's just like going to the office, like that level of pressure that you eventually crack, and then you get built up stronger, and then you eventually crack, and then you go to the next level. So like at a certain point, it just becomes like, oh, we need to be in Montana tomorrow. All right, cool. Initially started by just playing guitar as a kid, picking up guitar around 14, and just was kind of noodling around with that for years. And that eventually got me to, having a little local band with my friends, and then they'd be at the house rehearsing and trying to do shows. And that would eventually got to the recording process where, I had one of my close friends had a couple microphones and like a version of like Adobe Audition back at that time. And he installed it on my computer, and like I started, my band needed demos, so I was like, oh, I'm the only one with a nice computer at the house, and I was end up just recording everything just because I had the computer and one of my friends had a mic. But once I like saw EQs and reverb and delay, and like just tinkering with balance and levels and bouncing out and realizing, oh no, that wasn't what I intended. And like that process, like that completely took over, where I started to do that more and more, and the music and just started to fade more and more, or less and less over time. So I found a school in Tampa called IADT, and my sister happened to live over there. I had a free place to stay, so I went to the engineering college. That was like a little 4-year degree program that taught me, it had a fundamental on studio and music. Did that, eventually led me to, assisting in studios because my references from school got me into the door. And then that was like, okay, now I'm kind of officially in my career, and just the typical work your way up from intern, assistant, or runner, assistant, main engineer, and to like, move on and just be completely freelance. But it all kind of started just playing guitar at the house, and now I barely play guitar or do any music thing, or I have no inkling to want to really do that on the day to day. Just the engineering side was like, everything made sense to me. I had multiple people like that, and I feel like my main person that I'm like, I feel so lucky to have been introduced, like, was Josh Goodwin. Was kind of always that person where I look at him as like the kind of template, especially for my path, because I have a similar path as when you come from being on a recording engineer side to trying to bridge that gap to be a mixer. It's a difficult process, and it's not just a simple and cut thing. And where a lot of these big mixers that really like dominate what we do, a lot of them might have usually come from they were assisted another big mixer. So you're already in that workflow, and you in that world all the time, and your repetitions are already high, and like you're already kind of connected. So when you graduate onward, you're kind of already in that world. But when you come from the recording side, where it's much more wild and all over, and then you're trying to bridge that gap to be mixing, it's like it's a very difficult and interesting like monster. So like Josh Goodman was always like a person where I looked at like, oh man, okay, he's just do like follow his steps loosely, as far as like, okay, you have to go, forge your own path.